Namo Guru Be Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharmaya Namo Sanghaya Namo Guru Be Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharmaya Namo Sanghaya Namo Guru Be Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharmaya Namo Sanghaya Kande Laje Gwenje Toga Raga Shosam Bonde Chunze Cheje Yeben Zongwan Jen Dalun Debe Sena Shinjo Denpa Jeje Geja Shuso Sheje Chungwen Jawe Lodu Kesa Nabe Genjo Leshe Tabe Beje Lame Zebe Tongde Tembe Tende Laza Yewo Cheyo Nazo Medo Jishen Dongbe Nangsen Jeja Weja Yidu Chudin Yazo Sena Shinjo Chela Cheba Kashi Tongmen Dune Saba Lunga Yeso Mige Jiji Chebaran Dongba Sumji Mede Ningne Juba Dabu Soso Ningme Dede Mande Rula Cheje Bambe Denjo Deye Gombo Cheje Labjin Zeba Daja Samba Tabe Cheje Laman Damba Chena Chugu Kala Tenzin Dorjee Cheda Samben Deje Sema Sabje Cheje Chawa Abdu Namda Vese Yingle Shenba Sonjo Gola Chado Minga Tame Namu Sugu Rada Sidi Bando Minu Demba Taso Chini Sabe Tendan Jowa Gunla Kambe Chebara Jizu Losan Chaba Tembe Ningbo Rendo Seje Mingme Zebe Dejen Jen Time Kembe Wangbo Jambe Tebo Malu Zomze Sawe Kanjen Kebe Zogjen Zong Losan Tabe Shabla Sowa Mime Zebe Dejen Jere Time Kembe Wangbo Jambe Tebo Malu Zomze Sawe Kanjen Kebe Zogjen Zong Losan Tabe Shala Sowa Mime Zebe Dejen Chere Time Kembe Wangbo Jambe Tebo Malu Zomze Sa Kanjen Kebe Zogjen Zonga Losan Sovande Bande Zave Lama Rimbo Tazo Chiura Bende Denjo Kadi Chimbu Kone Cheso Kuson Toje Mudu Zed Bande Zave Lama Rimbo Tazo Ningara Bende Denjo Kadi Chimbu Kone Chodan Temo Mudu Zedo Bande Zave Lama Rimbo Tazo Ningara Bende Denjo La Kadi Chanjo Ningbe Ba Denbar Sho Masan Jume Shera Pare Maje Manga Namge Ngobo Soso Rari Yije Juyu Tuzon Ye Chanze Lo Dean Ta Gade Bara Samga Bodeye Soha Dean Ta Gade Bara Samga Bodeye Soha Dean Ta Gade Bara Gade Bode So Gere Tongda Jaju Shewa Mide Nebe Jendan Dewa Timba Doshin Pizon Dashi Denjan De Yo So Jimbe Soje Jonan La Janjo Bando Dane Jabzo Dage Chujuran Jebe Sonam Je Dola Binje Sanje Do Barasho Chedan Zoje Jonan La Janjo Bando Dane Jabzo Dage Chujuran Jebe Sonam Je Dola Binje Sanje Do Barasho Chedan Zoje Chonan La Janjo Bando Dane Jabzo Dage Chujun Jibe Sonan Je Dola Bin Sanje Do Barisho
Simje Tamje Tozalana Yang Dhamma Dove Sanje Hombo Rinpoche Niga Tawa She Tisi De Tambi She Senye Kunu Shanju Se Jima Senje Se Dami Semba His
Let me remind every one of ourselves to take a moment and cultivate the highest form of motivation. We call it Bodhisattva motivation, seeking complete enlightenment for the benefit of all other sentient beings. And with that kind of at least contrived bodhicitta, altruistic motivation, we should all participate in this discourse on Bodhisattva's perfection of wisdom gone beyond.
that the human there that transition the chiru jida mambo yor the kasa shiraba transition in teleganga ba teleden ganga go to that the transition goes at in my hearis.
No, so just to remind you, so what we were talking last time, so we are dealing with the philosophical standpoints on what is regarded as a self or a person by some of the prominent non-Buddhist schools. In my footnote, we're talking about Hindus, not anybody else. And there are many Hindu schools of thought, so we can't talk about every one of them. But there are two prominent ones which, so to speak, represent the whole spectrum of Hindu schools of thought with regard to Atma, or in English, the best translation is soul, but we call it self. So we have a school called Samkhayas, Changchenpa in Tibetan, or enumerators. So they regard, self or Atma as a conscious cognition. It's a consciousness and it's a cognition. So it's a subjective experience, which is what we call illustrative example of what Atma or the person is. And so there are many other Hindu schools of thought related to asserting some kind of subjective entity or experience as Atma or person. So they all kind of, incline towards the Samkhaya's school of thought. Then we have what we call the Vaisheshikas or Chetaba, not Vaibhashikas. Okay, that's a Buddhist. Vaisheshikas, but in some of the translations they call it Nyayikas, right? So I told you a little bit of my research, your translator. So it looks like they are some related, but I still prefer the word Vaisheshikas, Chetaba, particularists. So these are reductionists, in other words. So they regard a person or Atma as a matter. It's not a subjective experience, it is a matter. And so there are other Hindu schools of thought which might go along with that, saying that we might find some kind of a matter or a form, material thing, as an example of a person. Yeah. So we are looking into their philosophical standpoints and try to refute their standpoints. So of course we are dealing with enumerators or Samkhayas.
어디 다 거기 되게 가서 단다 정신 두두데 준주거나 짜증나요 말이지 지난 거는 도장 되레스 거기 기사들 야 집을 따봐야네 애네 란지 집을 따봐야돼 이제 거 잠에 내가 란지 말았어 인데 거 란지 집을 따봐야 말고 그 지기 잠에 자네 란지 집을 말았어네 어디다 남줄 내가 가서 랑신식 말이스 다다 수라가 랑신식 말이스 거라 남줄 수도 봐 지도 가가 좋아하면 더다름디 랑신식 말이스 지도티 담디 내가 담아지나나 아니 그 계단지도 kondukan 랑신식 손자 이 거디 다이 이제 말이 중요한 말이스 그 렌제 되는지
So of course there are so many English translations of this text, and I'm kind of not using exactly, but as a reference using Stephen Batchelor's translation of the guide Bodhisattva Chart Avatar, published by the Tibetan Library in India. And so what Geshe explained, actually we talked about this last time also, and we are looking at page 153, stanza 61, and then flip the page 154. What I heard Geshe read are the stanza 62 and 63. They all seems to go together. And just my footnote here, as I was trying to prepare for my translation, I was always trying to do, I realized that different translators have different way of translating, and some of the translations have included some extra explanations there. So we got a little careful because this chapter is a very difficult one, as you all know. So whichever translation we are looking at, so there may be some additions there, something, so we may not be on the same page. That's what I'm saying. So we got to be mindful of that. So that's my footnote. Translator outside, now to break it now. Now I'm translating what Geshe just said. So remember, although I think in this guide, Bodhisattva Master Shantideva's guide, in the root text, as we would say, there may not be sort of an explicit mention of the qualifying characteristic called permanence. A purusha or a person, a kibu in Tibetan, is a permanent according to some kayas or the enumerators. Okay, and so one of their contentions is this, that all the objects of senses, they are simply different in terms of their manifestations, but in reality they are of the same nature. Okay, that's their standpoint, one of the contentions. And so earlier, Prasangika Madhyamikas asked them, right, that how could there be auditory perception without the sound as its object? Right? How could a perception exist without its object? That's not possible. And so in response to that, some kayas, the enumerators, are saying, you know what, there is not a problem, because we assert that all sensual objects are of the same nature, they're of different forms or different manifestations. So even when there is no sound, but still we assert that there could be auditory perception or the sound perceiver. Okay, so that's their standpoint.
수자시로 그 최고가 랑시这个嘛都看看这样嘛是
no, so,
那么就这么说的我看看个是同个人是我这是那랑시这那么就他的意思的
no, so. So, as we talked about this before, that some kayas or tangchenpa in Tibetan, enumerators, so they assert there is what we call chizo, prime substance. That's how it has been translated, or sometimes we call prime principle, right? And so what is that? So that is what self is, according to them, Purusha. And so prime substance refers to a balanced state of these three feelings: pleasurable, unpleasurable, and neutral. That's neither pleasurable nor pleasurable. When all of these feelings are in a state of balance, we call that prime principle or prime substance. Yeah? And so all the objects of senses are of the nature of that prime substance. Are you with me? But that is not something perceivable. That is not evident to our perceptions. But when that prime substance manifests as all kinds of stuff, right, like a sound and the form and the smell, right? So these manifestations are just different, right? But in reality, they have the same nature. Okay? But that nature, you can see it. In the dormant form, they all have the same nature. In the manifestation form, they are different, right? That's what the Samkhayas are asserting. So we are looking at stanza 63 and 64 there. So some kayas or enumerators are saying that in terms of nature, sensual objects are just the same, but that is the dormant form. Like prime substance or prime principle, chizo in Tibetan, it is a balanced state of these three feelings, right? Although the terms used here, you can say at the bottom page 154, are sattva, translated as purity, but I think in the Tibetan word it is more like literally courage. And then we have the raja, which is translated as activity. In the Tibetan one, it's a dual, literally particle. And then there is the darkness. Now that's the same, tama. So these terms refer to the three types of feelings. Okay, just try to simplify it. So that balanced state of these three things, right, three feelings, is the ultimate truth. Okay, and that's not something visible to our perceptions, but that can manifest as many different things, forms and sounds and all of those things. So this example they have given is just like one person can be regarded as a father and a son, right, referring to something, right? Referring to your son, referring to your father, you are the son, and referring to your son, right, you are a father. Just like that, he said. So we assert that form, sound, smell in a manifest form are different, but in reality, they are one and the same thing, same nature. Yeah. And Madhyamikas are saying that your example is not working here. It's a mismatch between what you claim in your examples. Because when we talk about father and son, we can only assert that from a reference point of view, isn't it? But, you know, in the footnote, they assert what we call, you know, instantic reality. So that kind of referential is not possible. So in their claim, they said the nature of the father and the nature of son are just the same. Okay? But as a manifestation, father and son are different. And Madhyamikan says, well, there's a problem there, right? How can the nature of a father and nature of son be the same? And then these whole manifestations are different. Okay, yeah.
What is it? They do that with Tashanya Basi. Rongi Chaba Sunday said, that they are doing it. Daniel some Chanya been there, Toya Music. The Kodoji Chuchi, you know, and Namu say the Shangoro.
No, sir.
Didn't hear the tongue with a zero.
No, sir.
This is what that Namu say to go to Zumba, she wants to that. Nam Besha, Guzo Demisor show. Namu said,
no, sir.
Roshi said to Tono Demisor, Tonka, she said, go get Toya Yomaris.
No, sir.
Oh, this was the Koranji, the Namjur, Sigdo. Gangadi, should have the Daniels of Rangi Soza. This was that. You can't like yeah, they do Daniels of yours. Monday, they do Daniels on the carre. No, she was Mother Jill. She is so suggestively. They do Daniel Yomara. Could they do call them because so I yard of the way, you know, until they saw doing it. There was a they do the Yul Pasha or
you would have to do this. Pumbai tell do
Pumba, you know, but Pumba Yaga Yamadu said, the watching Mare. She said, take you to go Pumba, the all yours will go. Even go Pumba on the watching Mare. They do Yul Shaggy.
You did say the usual.
They do say Shiva Shaggy.
So, according to some Kayas, balanced state of those three things, right? Feelings, I should say, don't say things. Pleasurable, unpleasurable, and neutral feelings is, if we use our term, it is the what we call ultimate reality. Okay? But when that balance is off, disrupted by X, Y, Z, then manifestations happen. And these manifestations as sound, smell, whatever form, are from, if we use our term, is called the conventional reality. These are deceptive. Are you with me? The manifestations are deceptive, but the balanced state of the three feelings is imperceptible and ultimate truth. Manifestations are perceptible and they are false. They are, you know, deceptive there. So as Geshe explained, that in our Buddhist perspective, we do acknowledge feelings, right? Pleasurable feelings, unpleasurable feelings, and neutral feelings, neither pleasurable nor unpleasurable. But these feelings are subjective experience, isn't it? We never attribute these feelings to objective realities. But some Kayas, you know, they do. They say that all the sensual objects have these feelings, you know. And because of that, then you can experience the feelings. If the objects don't have these feelings, then how can you have the feelings, right? You look like an attractive vase, like, I'm so happy, right? You look at the ugly vase, like that. He said, that's there, you know, in the object. So that objects have feelings, and that's triggering your feelings, right? And that's their Samkhya standpoint.
Oh, it is good because they do that use of the Yul Pakia. She has Pani put a Puni Par Jewish Jonah. Give Geshe Jones. What is it? She had the Roshi Gangajiwaina. In the put a party, Rashi was she said, Geshe do Gaga Dodo of Syria, don't show those.
No, sir.
Kazan music. Roshi was already don't do this, already don't with it.
So one example they gave is that, one person can be both father and a son, right? They said, but they are of the same nature. Prasangika Madhyamika said, well, there is the problem, right? How can you say that the father and son have the same nature, and then also they are very different? If you say something is of the same nature, that is a one entity, isn't it? It's just like a one lumpy thing, if you can talk like that, right? How can it be different things, right? It's the same nature there. So in that case, if you talk about cause and effect, the cause and effect cannot be different because they are of the same nature. So cause and effect means this one, right? One lumpy entity, right? So that's not possible. So Prasangika Madhyamikans are debating with some Kayas. They said, you assert that all the sensual objects have the same nature, and that nature is the balanced state of those feelings, and it's imperceptible, it is permanent, it is partless. But then you said, when that balance is off, disturbed, then manifestations happen as sound, form, whatever the case may be, and these are different. So you seem to assert that the balanced state of the feelings is the what we call Pramatta Satya, ultimate reality, and all these manifestations are the Samvritti Satya, or the conventional reality. And you consider these are different, right? Because manifestations are perceptible, and the nature is imperceptible. He said, how can that be? Because in your philosophy, you assert the prime substance or the principle, prime principle, jizo, the nature as a cause, all the manifestations as a result, isn't it? So there's a cause and effect relationship. So if the cause and effect have the same nature, that is permanent and partless, then they are indivisible. So how can you say this indivisible phenomenon, one is balanced state and ultimate reality, as one is imbalanced state and conventional reality? Because you assert, right, that nature as permanent and partless. So it's indivisible. So how can now you divide into manifestations and things like that? Okay. So in the text of Samkhya's enumerators, as Geshe said, there is a mention that the nature, right, prakriti, nature itself is imperceptible. Okay? That's the balanced state of the feelings, and that's the subtle reality, so to speak. And then the manifestations are the deceptive reality. They are just like an illusion, maya. Yeah. So that's it. So the nature and manifestations are different in that sense. And Prasangika Madhyamika is saying that if they have the same nature, then how can you divide them up? They are permanent and partless. If you divide them up, then your prime substance is no more permanent and partless, because now it's getting, right, manifesting as something else.
Jude Jusa did you are chef to Mariso, Jude Jusa part of Pussy Taddy. 去年们的这个也就是这不是怕不下有嘛是吧？就是让些这个呢，他在对面这个来，这个也是怕的不做，就是就当下的这个们都是，我就是在有的这都是我的。
So the contradictions that Prasangika Madhyamikas find in the standpoint of Samkhaya's is that you assert that everything has the same nature, okay? And that is permanent and partless. But then you said, when that balance is off, then there are all these different manifestations. And you use the example of, a father and son. So if father and son have the same nature, right, I think in terms of intrinsically, they have to be identical, isn't it? They cannot be two different persons, right? Because when you think about father and son, there's a cause and effect relationship, isn't it? Father is the cause who produced the son, that's the result. And if they are intrinsically same nature, then they're identical, then how can, right, there be cause and effect relationship between father and son? So that's not possible, so that kind of contradiction exists. Whenever you say cause and effect relationship, we have to think about X and Y as two different phenomena, isn't it? X and Y, because they're different, then you can say one is the cause and other is the result. If everything is identical, then you cannot say this is the cause and this is the result. Okay.
Oh, this is here, Susan, she was then, Johnson, but then be he be running to made you know, the same tongue go by Madonna in Bisharos. Oh, this Susan, she was dancing, she was in the Susan, she was Maris, Susan, the Shiva Maris. In the dancing, Benega, Susan, go out the Queen. So the dancing, dreaming of she young to Maras. So me and Nego dancing as dance me. Zibinego, young so get up and draw younger or to young Shingamendus. She said, did it go champion again? Did they never shout to Maris or did it?
No, sure. So this is related to stanza 64, and where some Kayas, as we know, they assert the time substance right, is permanent and partless. Permanent means it exists forever, and so that person, if you called, is the one who perceives, right, form, sound, smell, and all of those things. And so Prasangikas are saying, if so, how could be a visual consciousness or perception be the same as the auditory perception perceiving sound? How can you say that the visual perception that sees form and auditory perception that hears sound are of the same nature? If they have the same nature, they're identical, right? How is that possible? And so if they are not identical, then when the visual perception can only perceive form but not sound, isn't it? So if there is no sound to be perceived, then how could there still be sound perceiver or the auditory perception? That's not feasible. Okay.
What is you say? Because young corner Chigu Soji say, no matane, Shima Lembe, Kargetabu, Shiri Jibutea, Shin Suzi, Namjur Hinge, Naji, Danzi Tini, Tonga in the Shenas, Unate Shiri Jibute, Daba member Jode, the Sulu Hiendan, Hien Jewish, what the dancing is and the call in the songs and the Kibukoran Doja, Mambo Yusana, and the call Chamage Rigmarvas, songs of Nego, dancing with Nego, Nega so Chagdo, teaching the Chamage Redomari, and teaching the Tegum to say. Here we give the any Garza to look here the Garza, 2 hand Jewishes. Corona Taba del Garza, could Taba Hill give us a Taba Chami, Jurami in Zura.
No.
That in the code
So as we know, there's some kayas or enumerators, Tangchenpa in Tibetan, they assert self or the person, Purusha, as consciousness and cognition, but it is permanent and partless. Yeah. But yet it asserts that this is the person who enjoys all kinds of sensual objects, isn't it? It can enjoy the forms and the sound and the smell, all of those things. So Prasangikas are saying, well, if something is permanent and partless, then how can you say that this cognition, sees the form, which is one aspect, then it hears the sound, that's another aspect, then it smells something, that's another aspect. So it has so many parts right now, right? So how can a partless have so many parts? So your contention is not holding water, right? So going with your assertion of the person as conscious cognition, permanent, partless, that means you cannot really subscribe to the notion of different situations where it is possible that there's no sound, smell, but only forms available, isn't it? So how is that possible? Because the person is permanent, so you should constantly, right, hear the sound or smell it or see the form. But that's not the case. There are so many situations that not all the sensual objects are available at the same time. Whereas you said this is the same person just enjoying everything. So you cannot assert there are different circumstances and situations like that. So Geshe read from the commentary, basically it's the same thing which he said earlier, that is, if the Samkhayas assert it is the same person, the same cognition that's perceiving all different objects, then you cannot really assert that there are different occasions and situations, because that which perceives form should forever perceive form, that which hears sound should forever hear the sound. But that's not possible, right? Because all sensual objects are not necessarily present in a given situation. And so that's why your assertion is not working here.
Shibati Ranshi, Shibati rang rangshi jigdu dembati khayi meshi shevala shirigi jibu rangshi nidu dembar chuba nidu jena titane yu ta tebe jibu jigdu tawan jode chuji shirigi jibu shami jigbudang genjik shewe ta mijibe tabadang soja gona chawar kelan bisheri Termasi simbaji shirigi jibuda simmebe pembo zuzo nyeshibo tida jang jigdi tawan jode kankishina yubani gi rangshi di songxing rangshi shami dakja duyebe dubi shiros kankishina namjurji shida kam swa nam 신주로 줌바인라 임바티 제 되는 총인가에 자외스 네 제도 주 랑신 된도 강이 랑신 된도 강이 데 매도 거기서는 남지 담지 줌바인만 되베제다 샤메도 군의 차반 되베 키네 나게 이셔디 지구의 마당 랑신 숨여봐 나게든 저셔 시 워드 지랑신 워드 지랑신 숨기네 리메드나 티메 계속 리베다나 미데비체로스 오틴자리다 에디 저노디 지부데 카자 랑신 지에나 이네 가사 타디 샤도 말이 지르지 진테네 이네 고자 남주는 다 랑신도 소소시야 요 말이 찍으리고 랑신 다바 샤미 지게는 인 콜리아 남주 내가 다 랑신 내가 소소시야 요 말아 소소시야 니 샤샤는 그 타디고 그러 찍을 때 야니샤 요 말아 어디서
단다긴 딜 카르켄기 페들레 마상하게
라
카르켄 타부 수신지 세들레 요 말아 단다 카르켄기 페샤들레 요 말아
खरी पैसा
कारके कार छपने की छपचे के दी तद पे दिले मरवा
कार दे तद चिक दोस
ओदी चिक सोना मदे
कार खजा दिस कार तद जिबु कोन चिक रेस गोरी शेगो शाने इनको नाम जी जोर मा जी जो तद नाम जो दा जिजो सा पेते न जी सो
लारे
कार का जी बेचे इन बेलो बतो अंदो या जेवो तो अंदो मबो तो यो ते जी वही
रे त इन पे दि डिग मेंदोस खंडे लागोदा
ला
पे दि डिग मेंदोस चे उमा थेंजु बगे खंडेस पाका
पे डिग सा दि को जे जोर दे नाम जी रो खा जो ये ना
ताको मारे
को छमे जी रे तो मारवा छमे जी ना नाम जी बता दे आयो मारा
ला
ओ जी
no so this pertains as I was reminding Gisela, right, sometimes he skips the lines there, so I'll back. So we are looking at stanza 65. So to exemplify some Kayas, their own standpoint, they said, it is just like an actor, who can play different roles, isn't it? It's the same person can play a king or a minister or a servant or soldier, right? But it's the same person. So like that, they said all things have the same nature, but in terms of manifestations, they are deceptive, right? The playing a role of a king and a minister are different, but in reality, it's the same person. Yeah, that's what it's saying. And Prasangika Mathemikas is saying that still this is not working, because if something can play different roles, right, there has to be changes happening, isn't it? But you assert the person to be permanent and partless, and so how can a permanent partless can manifest as so many different things? Because that's not, that's not feasible. If it could, then you cannot say that they are, identical, right? Because when we think about different things, that means that we assert that they are not of the same identical nature. With me? So you assert that all sensual objects have the same nature, that is permanent and partless, but when the balance is interrupted, then they manifest different things. These manifestations are different. Is that this is not working because you already assert, right, the cause to be partless and permanent, whereas that actor playing a role is changing the role, right? It's not partless and permanent. Right.
Oh, this is a Kangchen Namjur Tamje, 주변 데 그사 랑신 참이 참이 딱야데 뇌베셔다 강그세는 남줄 시자 그 세와 남신지 신지로 준바인 바디 티지 되는 총신 자위 대제의作用 랑신데 된저可以的매도 강그세는 남줄 담지 준바디 베셔다 샤메의 군의 자원들이 길린라양 남기에 베셔스 남주의 준바이사시 에네 랑시디가 샤메 군의 차위사시는 요리도 쓰고 그 샤메나 에네 군의 차위사는 차야게 비게 샤트 요마로 어디서 그지
And person Gigas is telling them that you assert the prime substance as conscious cognition, permanent, partless, is pervasive. It pervades everything that exists. If something is permanent and partless, so how can it pervade all things that are existent? Because that is right part. So you cannot assert that they have the same nature, but the manifestations are just different and deceptive reality.
다 니빠시 세미서 강바 얘기되더라 시잡을 루네 주발에 세티 조세주라데 무슨나 이론 타디 계속 대한 장생기 사업의 소기 생이jen게 나케랑 바힌디 디여와 중세라 때네 시잡아서 무득게 루 타데디 조아 세덴지 장제 야라 무디기 루 소소르 제베 동메노스 내가 세동 조금 누주소 시자바다 리버젠바 피제르 누주 투나 데네 제다 연데 레더지 시자도 넘버 2 세베스 당보 제라 야 구예베 나기 다네 용 그래서 용 로슨 레 통신베스 제 로서 연대 구이 대디 조진 연대 나라라 데 주시바 심마이 뱀보 민지와 탐지 차버들라 기부 강사 디 남장소스 즉동 저기 이니바 연대라 제 연대 녀 이시요발레스 데다 근데 디는 싫어 룩 뭐였네 정제다 시다원이 디시나 에네 데바 시다라 리바 포스토 그리스라다 정제 시자로 다다데 시다와 시위스
시다바시에서 디게 셈바 셈에 대다장선의 말을
베게 어디 정제바 나 시리 기부도 다데 나도 속도게 돼
So remember we said that in Hinduism there are many different schools of thoughts or tenets. So we can't talk about every one of them, but talk about two prominent schools which seems to represent many others. And we have some Kayas who point to something that is conscious cognition, a subjective state as a person. Then we have the Vaisheshikas who pinpoint something that's a matter, right, not a cognition subject, as a self or a person. So now we have to kind of dealt with the Samkhya standpoint and refutation, and stanza 67 roughly there it deals with now Vaisheshikas, Chetapa, reductionist school of thought.
What is your daddy? Tear Joseph daddy Kondiri, Oman's workers. Tear Joseph that Muslim no daddy just changing look here at the Shomra. Dishina Tada Muziba Ganga changing about Sheshang, you did, yes, you Maris. And changing by she couldn't double do years in the no do the dead, the Manjao going to Mudi look at this in Shartse, 무디바 강가 장전 봐 제대로 좀 direct 계좌시 가이 말이 쓰거든.
A clarification has been issued in the commentary that Geshe was reading from, that there is no such claim that all Hindu schools of thought are, somewhat identical with the Samkhayas or the Vaisheshikas. They said kind of roughly they go along with these things. So nobody is claiming that Hindu schools of thought can be only divided into these two schools of thought. But they're kind of associated, right? If we're going to categorize, they fall into one of these two categories.
어디 튜스 되셔다. 튜바 되는데 다데 소소 주다소 시작 뭐 대바 인사도 대바 실세도 되시야로 어디 계셔도 다디 시작하셔야지 시작한 것이 좋은 조이소. 제시 연den시 레시 제스는 다고 시고버시 연den시는 깔고 보세요. 말보세요. 연den시 레스는 샤와시하지요. 좋아 되어도 주비죠. 제스도 제일 시바 세월 제일 좋아 시시. 시자시도 이제 디 주사가 쉬들 시자시로
가르스게.
라
치다스나.
시자스나 그 낭젠지
낭젠 no.
시자스에 낭젠시 이니 가르세
제 유엔된 레치 치다세 다 직상.
시자시 다디니 가르세 지 연대시 가르세 기부도 가르세 뉴로스물리 동시에 두아지 시작 두아사 두스는 주루시야 되와
치다스 가가 직세 두어치.
시작이 소소요 시작이 두아스는 주루 소야 되죠 뭐
no.
두아시가
no.
시작도 넘버 2시다 먼저 디 시작사 대만이 얘기해야죠 거기 다
trude나.
주토나 되고
So many of these schools, they of course present realities from their perspectives, right? Like say in Buddhism, all the Buddhist schools of thought, they are presenting on the level of the basis the true truths, right? Their versions of the true truth, and then they have the path and the result. So like that, Vaisheshikas, they say that everything that exists, all knowable or phenomena, they belong to these 6 categories, right? That these are, like say, there is the Ze, substance. I'm literally translating here, so until Geshe will give explanation, it might stand or change. So I'm saying the Tibetan word in case we have to go back. Yunden, quality. Le, which is action. And Chi. Chi is like a collective or generality, right? There's a collective noun, right? Generality in that sense. Chera are the particulars, right? Particular case examples. And then there is what they call the Duba. Duba can be collection or aggregate, right? So under these 6 right, types, they said all phenomena can be talked about, right? They're a presentation of realities here.
다 제사디 저 초시 대신 조는 시스템이 다지 당부 제들 그 노시 여러 될 되어서다 구여에 노게 다다 그 제지래도
다
제들 다 지제 그저 어디 제디 요데는 제가나니 지금 다되지 될 다되들 로서 레 셴베세 제 로소 연대게 구이된디 조지 연대신 라는 데에 세바 자 심마이베 변보 민지바 탐제도 샤바 되라시 기부다 강사장 디 남상소 디지보다 너무 가자 나스 기부스는 강사제 어디 민그 남상 있어다
저 다디기 체조 가져야 되다.
다 그런 다 제초 나시는 제세야지 나세 이시 다 그런 이야도 그릇은 될 조서 가자 다들 연대 구.
가서 다 걸 연대 구열스.
걸 연대 구. 연대 다 연대 그제도 다 연대 구네. 그래서 그래서 빈보시 되도록 기부다 가서 찍바시. 자 지도 저기 니바 연대는 다도 다 니바 제도 연대사이디 다 제도 도사로와 다 연대사들 가지야스나 연대 니바 연대라 제 연대 니시요발레스 연대사들 다 니시요서
라 니시지
라 지다지
단다겐디 제기 낭젠리아 다스겐 코란라 연대 구별
다 제도 연대사 다 코란데 가르스는 뒤쪽이나 가르스는 제세야디 인스
제 코란나 랑세 구열스 말에
라 말에 다 시자리에는 쪽
라랑
요르와 이나 당부도 제세야도와
라랑
제들에는 제디 나서 다들 다 연대 찌득도 어디나 다들 제가 나래도와
라랑 다를 연대 구열스면
구스 군데도 다
연대 가르가르 다 찍니 스페전스나
가자 제가 다 연대 군데서데 로로데 내가 시고로와 제도 용계시 되바스는 것도 되샤다 되바스고와 나와서나 셰다도다 되면되지 베바스나 다 베조시바시 치다 강사 용거로와 다 쳐스도 내도 켈링거로와 저 쳐스야디 제직하고다 다 쳐만이 무슨 미가로와 어디 뒤에 가가 나가 연대셔 나 거기 저거가 대서 쏠 때는 다 되는데 쳐시나 다 시고리스 쳐 많이 마시나 다
So Vaisheshika's or reductionists, Chedapa in Tibetan, they classify phenomena into 6 types, and Je or the substance, Yunden or the quality, Le or the action, Chi or the generality, Cheda as particulars, and Duba as collection or aggregate. So of this person, Atma or self, Da, is part of the substance, okay, substance category, person or the self. So in Tibetan, Chibu is a person, which in Sanskrit called Purusha, yeah? And then Da is the self, right? They are synonyms, right? We say person, self, synonyms. And anyway, so that self or person is a substance category. And this person has 9 qualities, right? That would include, say, the person has intellect, Lodademba, right? And this person has desire, right? Deba. And this person, can make effort or do things, Bejun. And this person has, they call Che, we can say the Dharma, some quality of being able to experience both pleasurable and unpleasurable. Okay, that's called Che. Because in Sanskrit the word Dharma works, Tibetan, but I know in English it doesn't work. Then, what else? So because this person is capable of doing both good and bad, right? It can practice Dharma, sort of thing, the positive things, or it can create a lot of headaches, like negativities, So these are the qualities ascribed to person or the self, Purusha, that belongs to the category of substance. Perhaps J, I wonder, can be translated as matter also. We will see.
Right. 다 연대 곳에 다 지리 연대 곳에 다들 드레싱 예와 지리 레산이 토리다 지리다 인송 좀 저와니 코아당 너시 다 다기 뭐라 정신도 또비 로서 연대 탐 연대는 싸워 지야발라세 제제네 다 지금은 내베세 타바타고 되도스 어디다 다 연대 구샤서 연대 그다 연대 그다 염소 거저 가지 tudo quase de dizer coa coores.
No.
Quando ele ainda tipo dá de onde de dá quando tipo de deve nega dá quando chega nhamsan quando lo de gonja de ro de gonja ne ele quando dá que de jonton dá tipo nessa 어 진짜 타와 있어.
아, 니미로 삼 공잡선한테 타버터로.
어디 타요?
So in terms of presenting realities, the truths, Vaisheshikas talk about 6 categories of phenomena we already gave you. And a person or Purusha or self is part of the substance category. And that person has 9 characteristics or qualities, as we would say. And so as long as the person is associated with these 9 characteristics or qualities, the Tibetan word yunden can be characteristic, quality translated, then person is in samsara, is stuck in samsara. But once they, based upon their discourse, right, the person reflects on the disadvantages of being with these 9, right, characteristics, then do the meditation practice, because they have meditation practice. And if the person can isolate right, itself, gender neutral, say, itself, from all these 9 characteristics, and then you stand alone, right? You are solitary, then you found the moksha. Now you are liberated, right? That's their presentation of liberation from samsara. Right, when the person is with these 9 things, then you're like drama rama. But actually, I didn't say the drama rama, But so samsara, drama rama happens. So the person reflects on all the disadvantages, and then practice the meditation prescribed, and then is able to dissociate from all these 9 characteristics. Now you stand alone. You have nothing to do with them, and you are liberated. So you are in moksha. Okay.
어디 다 제자바시 우과바시 sekse만남 맹나라데 맹나라다 우과바시 우괴섭데 중국에서도
로
우괴섭 우과요 말이야
알 우괴섭
저 우과요
그래
진짜 우괴섭데 공부해서라 그런데
알레 공제
공자기도 강에 공부하지 말아 다 진짜 시대타지 책조정도 시자바시 우과바시 그 맹나라고 우과바시 우과바시도 우베도식 상하리스 우베도식 상시다 우베 차우조셔
우베답디 빠빠고에서다 우베기 쫄랑게 된 거죠.
저 들으다 우베 그 시야리 빠빠 공부했는데 앞에 들으시면 되지.
쫄랑게 되고 No. So there are many different names referring to the Vaisheshikas or the reductionists, Chadapa, and among them is they are also called, very hard to say in English, Upapa. It's just like, what is it, closer English, not that we want to nickname anybody, like an owl, literally, the owl, the bird, okay? And so maybe it's possible, I think, in that somehow they learn some owl behaviors as a part of their discipline, right? Or that maybe some of them probably wear the owl, what do the owls have, feathers or something as part of, right, their moksha. So they're also called owl devotees. Maybe that's the best English words I can come up with. Upapa.
다 된거 봐네. 다 코두즈르 디셰. 타바토 디셰. 다 대다 대다 시르 다게 다게 다 semgi pembur 시다바 우바디 남나시 남자서 대다 거 봐네. 대다 시르 다게 다 semgi pembur데바 대야 메데도 시다히나 대저에 semme바 pembu semme pembo양 다마인데 semme바 이베셰데 베네 포바헤노스 지소 다 거지 semme 다 semme pembo 소이세아디 인디 다 이세아디 태그메두스 그래서는 데 다마리스 코 소이베셰스 인디 베네 포바힌스 포바드 코 다마이바 코 지자바 켈링라
나로와
포바 벤 소고 다 거지
try to find the stanza. So I think the stanza 68 there, 7 and 8, right? How the Tibetan word links to the next one. So Vaisheshikas, or the reductionists, accept a person or self as belonging to the substance category, and that person is a matter, okay? Not a cognition, not subjective reality. It's a matter, but so as a matter, it does not have mind. So let's call mindless matter. I know matters don't have mind, but from this point of view. Prasangikas are saying, well, that's not working. If the person is a matter, has no mind, then that person is just like a vase. You know, why couldn't a vase be an example of a person? That vase has no mind, you know, exactly matter like a vase.
What is it? The Shoma the night, semi before you see me. One the dati, because I think go by it to the Shirita gas, that semi before they were made it to Shidana Tinder, semi. Pemboyan, that means Simi Bishop, Benapomation Tisha. Young dress, sim da member, Mercy, Simi Pemboyan duos, tell a short mama nare. That Rani Simi Pemboyan Bishop, you mission me. When the daddy is Simbadan, judicially gones. Chosen them be said, you share the shares, that did it. A course, similar, you measure that in the Kazakh Marathon. Could I get a pebble edition of call Robert of the Leroy of the Kazakh Shiba that report to go called Soundors. Koran pebble is so many cigarettes. That's it. And go they do the less out, go doing Yumara, Koran. Shiva Marina court Robert of the Shiba that me on Ganga sounds there. Did a draw any legacy to this.
In a Koran semi-yomars and semi toyers. Koran semi-yomars in a semi-quality of torchigors.
Oh, this is same to call Robert of that.
Same to Kokar, which I call Robert.
Oh, this is that. The same to that consult, they can show more so much. Could they wish that the people is to that corner Shiba Ribaka.
So we are looking at 68 there, and so as Geshe explained, Vaisheshikas or reductionists, I call them Chirapa. So they regard a person or Purusha or self as matter with no mind. Okay. And then Prasangikas, and then how can you claim this person can enjoy, right, have pleasures and displeasure? It has no mind. That's not making any sense here. How is that possible? And why can't a jug or a vase can experience the same thing? It has no mind. There's no, it doesn't matter. But it is assisted by the mind. You know, it does not have a mind, but it's assisted, right, like helped by. Help is on the way kind of thing. The mind is helping, so therefore it can feel pleasure, pain, everything like that. So as I was asking Geshe to clarify this, what is this whole thing? Because in their school, of course, if you ask them pinpoint what self is, that is a matter. But a person is a collection of things, it's not just one. So in that collection, aggregate, there is a mind. Are you with me? The mind is in the collection. So when the mind assists the matter, then matter can be happy, then matter can be yagati, right? That's what it is. You know, itself is not a mind. It doesn't have a mind, but the mind helps on the way, then you feel pain and you feel pleasure. That's their explanation.
거 유식을 거 냠도 근데 시바즈 냠도 거 로바주 시그스나 되는 거 되지고 말이스 그 참이 지금 시는데 되게 딱 봐야 되고 말이고 더뭐 마기지 되는 거도 나 이제 시발 된 그 유일 좀 되시고는 얘는 그 딱봐 되게 배보 가서 배보 되고 말아 그 코로나랑도 마시는 강지 콜야 유식을 열어 봤어 어디스 지금 어디 저는 다들 유식 말이서 배보 있어야 되는 게도 어디서 그래서
알다 건저긴 다데 뱀보체 이네 뱀보체 딱바체 참여체
딱봐 속시고
라
속으로 와서 배보로 와
뱀보고다 딱바체
딱봐세
참여체
딱봐이나 이거 유식 말아서는 유식을 거냐도래 아니 시발이라고 뭐 시발도 거냐도 소도요 이 지그서 얘는 저 내말에도 나고 딱봐 지고 써야 돼 제문도 그 시발도 영저 좋았다 유시야 좋았어 얘는 딱봐 참이 되는 좋아미 가지고 말아 왔어
So I was just double checking, thought I heard it right, and I did actually. As a part of their philosophical standpoint about what self or person or purusha is, it is a matter and has no mind, but that matter is, they assert as permanent and partless. Okay, so the person is permanent and partless here too. And so then the Prasangika Madhyamika said, then how can you expect a matter to experience pleasures and pains like that? They said, well, there's a mind on the way helping it, right? Then that doesn't work. Then that means that if the mind can bring some changes, you feel happy, you feel yagati, that means you are changing. So you are no more permanent, right? So your assertion of being permanent, partless is not working. So that's what the Prasangikas are pointing out.
어디서 그래서 진짜 나고 저 중세 자매가 이케라는 랑나 예 선배 다들 샤와지 잡는 대신 다 요함에 다바 이미시스다 거기 다바 놓고 이 동목을 유마시오시 얘는 야 시바 좀 저 유시는 거 요아에는 다바를 말스 다들 가도록 어디지 얘는 그래서 저의 미주고시로서 돈도는 대단 유시와 매와라 샤제다 샤제 제와히 나케랑와 데 미데오도 돌라데 두마시기 나가 나도 쉐와다 요벌 주에 쉐다 페노제 고바조세 제비시비쇼 쉐데 무대 이나네 당신바 시자바 리바제바 소인두지 중세 링베 세마디드 소레 테다기 두지 고베 리바 마운드 숨바타르 데양 테다 고지게 리바 테다 데도세 제 주다에 다베 나가바잔 제 장제 코여서 주베 현재 당지 지시 미기가 게든 간지 렌지지 수화다르지다 춤나 주대 따바다디 저거비 진짜다 군다지다 나 고바 렌지 나 고비 야라이비시 군다지다 소다 고지 테더텐도스 어디에 다세 당지 군다세 아제다 렌지세 아니여와 군다세야 두다마도 다생게 되제 렌제세야 되가서 강게 줄이용게 수조 타면 강게 줄이용게 주제메바 강게 제베 당지세야 저러 어디야 세다 다데디까야 그래서 디군다 고야 디 렌제 고베 연하들이라고 그랬어 얘가 락바드 바까나 렌제 그 군다디 상세야 여러 고 디나도 디제 여르지 주제에서도 디도 코메와 가운데서 엔디 쇼크 렌제디디나라 노야 그게 뉴슈도 통고 있어. 이샤네 니는 군다가야 돼 있습니다.
So of course here remember when it comes to grasping at self, we said there are at least two types. One is this natural innate grasping at self, that every one of us has, every sentient being has. We don't need to be taught, go through education, everything. There doesn't have to be any good reason. It just pops, right? That's what it is. It's called natural. It does. Then there is what we call intellectually formed grasping, or I call philosophical grasping at self. That only exists when you subscribe to certain schools of thought or tenets, right? If you don't subscribe to certain schools, you don't have that form of grasping. Yeah. Of course, here we are dealing with philosophical sort of a graspings at self, right? We looked at the Samkhayas, and now we're looking at Vaisheshikas, right? And the reason why I do this first is we are dealing with coarse perceptions of grasping at self. Relative, this is easy to understand because they give us reason, right? They said, well, it has to be, conscious cognition. It has to be matter with the 9 capitals. So they give us reasons. So it's easy to imagine, and then we can see the reason, right, why this is not working out. Yeah? So by doing this, we are preparing our mind to be able to understand the innate grasping at self, which is difficult because it just pops with no reason. So being able to refute these things actually helps us, right? We are on the way, let's say, to be able to kind of recognize the innate grasping at self and then, refute it. So some of the arguments that follow, right, we will look at is that now because Prasangika Madhyapikas have poked into their standpoint and all the loopholes there and said this is not feasible, and so now they are coming back that they said if there is no such a self, then how can you talk about the basis of law of karma and results, isn't it? Then how can, right, an agent experience the result of the karma? There is no self, that's no person. So that's not, that's why they said the person has to be permanent. Otherwise, how can you say, right, a person create causes and experience the result? Because who's there, right? It has to be permanent. Yeah? And that's what they're going to come back to tell the Prasangika Madhyamikas. And you guys are also telling us that, oh, if you practice the path and then you become like a Buddha, like this, the whole thing has no basis. You said there is no person, The second argument they're coming back is that if there is no such a person, then what you guys are trying to do, develop compassion for who? Because, that's not working either. And so I think in their mind, right, once you refute their notions of the self, then they feel like a person's self couldn't exist at all, isn't it? So it becomes a nihilistic perception. Then they say there's no basis for law of karma and result, and there is no basis for developing compassion. So now what are you guys trying to do here, right? So that's the kind of arguments that follows in the couple of stanzas. Yeah. Well, I mean, from their perspective, these questions are very valid questions, right? Definitely. And what's happening is that as the Prasangikas are refuting their notions of the self, and then they feel that if such a self doesn't exist, then you are completely knocking out the whole basis of law of karma and results and the developing compassion. Then what's the whole point of all these things, Because what they're mixing up is that, by refuting their notions of self, they are not realizing that still we exert conventional I or the self, right? They think like, well, if there's nothing, then all the things you are talking about is senseless too, right? So they're not able to differentiate between conventional I or the self that exists, and by refuting their notions of the self, we don't mean that self doesn't exist at all, right? But they're missing that point. So they are just feel like anxious, like, how can you say this, you know?
Diri ya chiro gaga wo diri linde sha ga meta ba sa sha ona. Deji ge pe gyun tuya di sha to mo la pe me re jo ko na samo da ni da. Meta ba se na. Ni ngonzo meta ba se de kare se na ko wo jo de kale kal ba gyun di jo jo ma ba. Ye ga ba. Ko na ko meta se This time the car over that lady thing, and less I get in you go to less over, and lady says you can take him to some of the car your mother.
So of course these are very philosophical matters, and if you deeply absorb into this, you know, of course we cannot sort of accuse them or blame them in any way, right? Because these are the difficult matters. They are thinking very hard, right? And I mean, many of these schools assert that there's a life before and a life after, and there is something continuous. So they think that, well, you're pulling the whole rug under my feet, and now what are you doing? Then what is the point of all this thing, right? They're really, honestly, right, I'm struggling and coming with that. And as Geshe say, the Buddhist notion of selflessness and impermanence is very difficult for many schools to understand, right? For us, impermanence means something that changes from moment to moment, something that disintegrates from moment to moment, yet on the basis of the continuity, that's something that exists for a while, isn't it? But for many of those Hindu schools of thought, for them, impermanence means complete destruction, isn't it? So they couldn't say, right, if something is like destroyed, dismantled here, then it's like, you know, you broke the cup. Well, there's no cup. You know, so they're not able to assert the continuity of something, even though it undergoes momentary changes and disintegration, right? So therefore, they're saying, well, the self has to be permanent. Now you say the self is impermanent, and then it disintegrates every moment to moment. Well, then self is getting destroyed. There's nothing left, right? That's what is really important matter. They're thinking very hard too, right here. Yeah. So we will there, and we welcome your questions. Give me 1 second to write down the page number so I keep track of things. We are out of the way. Page 157, 69. All right. Nothing? Okay. Where's the traveling mic? Oh, yeah, you have it. You have a question first? Oh. I'm changing from moment to moment, changing my glasses. Like, I don't see you have a mic. I thought you want to ask a question. Yeah.
For these two schools that we looked at, does moksha imply stopping rebirth in samsara?
The moksha imply rebirth in samsara.
Yes, stopping rebirth.
Okay, let me.
Moksha liberation, right?
Right, moksha liberation, right. Kontugi tanda gin tharba thoba sechorwagin. Tanda chirabe tharba thoba sechorwagin. Tadi in the curtain tharba thoba sana ya yangjol quality yorisgo yomarisgo kontu. 다디 타르바토버와 코란스로 타르바토버나 양조 코왈 마 코리움거래 코리움거 말해서
아니 되고
right. Like in their view, once you attain the moksha, then you're out of samsara. You're not going to be back. Yeah.
So do they assert rebirth?
konzurgi gewangaji kelengyo wesa. That's right. Yeah, they accept the theory of rebirth, right? Because you know, you may not attain the moksha in one lifetime. That's right. So they accept karmas ripening over lifetimes. Yeah.
Am I correct in when they say that they're looking to balance out feelings of pleasure, displeasure, and
right.
the other one, neutrality?
Feeling, yeah.
Am I correct to think, I'm not sure my thought process is correct. This is why they go after achieving that state. I think they go to the formless realm, right? They go for form and then they go to the formless realm, and in that
That's where they
state,
get the balance.
they get the balance. Is that what they're after? Am I correct in like connecting those two?
Okay, I'll ask that question. Right, we didn't talk about it. So, morang this go that the came the page Tangzhenba the menro that the Tidu Tangyum dige the Chanyamba Yimbayina that the Conjuntum the Bessar Labarwage. Sedukalia Morangi, the Samlo the Takda Yunaman Sarwage, the Conjun Yamlen Chen, Tidu Tangyum, the Chanyamia, the Tangaza soon as Sume come to Durwage. Sume come the watch a lesson and it Tidu Tangyum Chanyum, but the top two go. Dibado, Tidu Tanyu Chamanu, but the container. So I did Tanyu Chanyu Bachorwa. The Tobe Negab ding on the dinner Sugam ne Sume come Dorwage. Sume come the watch a little bit, Tidu Tanyu Chanyum the Nigi or Vasa, and Chanyum the Kadu or so.
Today get any kind of it. Chidan Sumika, that Sunday we can't get Sumika killing with Tanda Korachidan. Use it, they do Tanyu some to tell them your words that couldn't Chanyam. 근데 휴식이 매 내가 미 통해야다 유디시야 들이 요 말이지.
당 아주 동반이 있어서.
동반이 있어다. 나 근데 저기 대화 시자, 동행 시자, 일단 시자 즉시 휴식이야 용서 이제는 유디 교 통과리지.
맞네.
남주스 그러.
그래.
어디 주문에 가지고 어디 무슨 그래서 차념에 내가 미 통해야다 들이 요 말이래.
근데 차념은 내가 너무도 교야 러비디 수매 감다 봐 정말 주로 버스 그러. 나 கொஞ்சம் 톱 걸어 봐.
저 문제 더 많이 받을 가르사 차념 받으세요. 민저에는 지자들 나사 콜지 여에는 그 나기세야 매 계좌매 오신 나사 무시 여 내가 들 가르스나.
차는 안도래 차념 요청 걸거든.
지자 여시 여나 문제 매버티 가도 가래. 차념 봐.
알레.
다最 나기도 세 기본도 세야죠. 동선 차만요죠.
Well, I mean, they might accept the formalism, all of those things, but that's not how they explain it. What they're saying is basically presenting the realities as they are. If you can use a parallel term, in Buddhism we talk about how emptiness is the ground, the reality, everything manifests out of it, right? But emptiness is not perceptible to ordinary perception. So like that, for them, that balanced state of feelings is imperceptible. Okay? That is a subtle reality. Right? When that balance is off by anything, then manifestations happen, then we have pleasure, pain, all of those things. So it's just like presenting their realities it is, you know. And then I asked Geshe-la, I mean, is something, where do we achieve it, that kind of balance, right? Do we necessarily have to go to the formless state or something, right? Geshe-la said, no, in their way, the presentation is that, I mean, we are not able to recognize it. Otherwise, even in our state, right, it's just like when everything's going well kind of thing, right? And that's a balance. Now you feel like, I'm so excited. Great things happening in my life. Oh my gosh, the sky is crashing on my head. Then it's off balance. But when you don't have those right things, then that balance, that's what they're talking about.
Oh, yeah. Okay, because they go in deep into the concentration practices. And I think their goal is to go to what they think is enlightenment,
right?
But we think it's like
so
the form of formless.
Would the moksha be the state of balance, right? We can ask that.
Yeah,
right?
well,
right. Yeah, that would be right.
They don't really achieve enlightenment. We think they just go to the form and formless realm, right?
Quran this go the Geshe di tanda tendam temba ina da chike ngondo jue ne kap chungu ro was ro ge konzo chanya ma ro ge chede kan liya da pena konzo deja di ken thaba ro ge thaba top de kala da chanya ba di nyam do yung go ro so da
그게 말이 chanya ba thanda ye de be no de yo be dinga jiwo du sia de bo yo dinga nga jiwo mi du sia de bo 진짜 차만요 그래요.
알아요.
내가 기본 동사 누구 sia 들어지 가에 땅님 저 누구 될 가래 차냐고 쓰기로.
이제 차냐바디 된담 대바이나 dimngo도 체나 람ngo도 체나 타버 톱 거야 계속 게요.
네 가요 말이지. 지나 그나 됐다 지다 거라 내주도 될 되셔고 다. 자와 타바 토야게 쓰는다 연소 좋아서는 힘도데 내도 다니면서 될 자리고 그래서 다 콘서트 야 파자도 리오디선 인기가 도도리고 하셔 콘서트 야 매버서 내도 다니면서 대자 매버시 타바토니 인지가 동네 누가 매우 차로로.
Now, the console again, thing is in common to go about something. The thing is a she would bet thing the mother chamber chanyo, but the young mixer chamber.
근데 저거 다다들 거기서 공장 차냐고 이게 말이. 그래서 저도 용어들 다 기본도 세아도 누구도 세아도 드디어 가면 이제 반반을 싫어. 될 차냐고.
The Gomjab Chanyamadi, you see get a dick shigo.
대시가
So, yeah, it is possible that through deep meditations, there's another state of balance, right? But right now, we're talking about just the realities on the ground, right? You could have it, I could have it. It's just like, hey, how are you? I'm okay. Like, oh my gosh, I have great news. Like, I have this terrible news. Like, then it's all balanced. That's what we're talking about, yeah.
늘 그래서 나는 추지당 이제서 쉬어 쉬고는 이주로 가대래 고야랑 희사도 어디서 해야 되고로 공자미 저게 가야 말이고 내장 쉬고다.
Right, so right now it's just talking about their presentations of the reality, 6 categories of phenomena, right? And what is the ultimate truth reality, right? What is the conventional sort of thing they don't use, right? And we're just only talking about realities, nothing to do with do we meditate on them, when do we achieve, nothing like that, right? Yeah.
So at the very end, Geshe presented the not the Vaisheshikas, but no, he's starting a new chapter having to do with the objection that some have, the substantialists, they could be Buddhists as well, that if the self is impermanent and comes into being and ceases to exist momentarily,
Right.
right, that would mean that it would be impossible to establish the relationship between positive actions and effects and negative actions and effects, the law of karma.
All right, okay.
Right. No, that's not my question.
Okay,
This is what they're saying, right? Okay. So, but it seems to me that the Prasangikas would not dispute the premise of that. The premise being that the self comes into being and ceases to exist momentarily. That is acceptable.
Right.
No,
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 let me-
because
let me-
it was
okay,
said.
I'm missing something there. Okay,
Okay,
let me
see,
hear it, yeah.
what Geshe said, or what we heard, is that the self doesn't come into being and ceases momentarily, according to the Prasangikas. But it does. It does cease all the time. The self ceases to exist momentarily. That's the meaning of disintegration. So this is acceptable to the Prasangikas. This is the premise of their question.
Right, it's not acceptable to them, you mean?
No, they say yes, it's not acceptable to the opponents.
Right.
Yeah, but they agree. Both the Prasangikas agree that the self comes into being and ceases to exist momentarily. So the self that I had a second ago is not the same self as they have now. They would agree with that. But yes, they would. The Prasangikas. Yes. But the others say that's not possible because that would violate the connection between the positive
Cause and
action, cause and effect, right?
Right.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, yes, yeah.
But it was said that the self continues according to Prasangikas, but
Right.
it doesn't really. Prasangikas maintain that this is the presentation. What they understand, the opponents understands of what the Prasangikas are saying is correct. But what we heard is that as though they misunderstand the Prasangikas. It's a qualm. It's not a question.
Okay, so check me. Okay, check me whether I understood where your point, right? So you say Prasangikas assert that self is what called disintegrates momentarily. Is that
Ceases
what
to exist.
What?
Ceases to exist.
Ceases to exist
Okay,
momentarily.
yeah.
That's right. But yet it continuously exists.
No,
Or not at all, right? That's
no,
what
it
it
doesn't.
Oh,
No,
they
it
don't?
ceases. How could it continue? We heard just now that it continues to exist, but it doesn't. If it ceases to exist, it doesn't continue to
Oh, okay,
exist.
okay, right.
There is nothing that continues. That's
Okay.
my point.
From Prasangic point
From
of view.
Prasangic point.
Oh,
of
okay,
view.
I'll
Exactly.
check with Geshe.
Yes.
Right, right.
Yes.
I think I'm sure this will be part of next round of teachings, right? We haven't talked about it yet, right? He just kind of laid out what's coming
yeah.
up here.
It's this. You see, this is the problem for them again to say for the opponents. They say it's not possible for something to cease to exist and yet the karma to continue to the next life and so on.
Right.
But Prasangica says it is possible.
Yes. Yes, Prasangica says yes. No, Prasangica,
True or not?
right. Prasangica says things disintegrate momentarily, but it's possible that the cause can bring effects, right? That's Prasangica's
Yes, but
standpoint, right?
momentarily means ceasing to exist.
Right,
That's
right, yes. Right. So let me double check with Geshe. Just say. Okay. So this was we will continue this discussion. Right. I'm sure follows the Quran. This sigi or that agi kharsa or again. Ta di any kiji yuwa dugu dana rawa again. Mida ba ina. Any kharsa or any konjo ki kharsa that you the David namsha the leg you take namsha shat kuya marwas rawa again. In it than that uma tenju wagi. Any kansa second the and kiji you what do your there and June la tene the lagu or slugger again. June killing your wa. Uma tenjubergi kansa kiji you what have in a kiji you what him June la tenza June the take or some or just that June kill and the country sling or Korasana Penakiji tango the shigwina or wage, gab or wage. Chidical June the country shall go.
June the country or that when the mill garden is much about you, June Shagro, said Delina. Quite said the Lega Karashi, the course is 7 million. Sure, shower, said to Lega Casalina, Tiliga Ganga, Gigo, the Shiva, cook, and share the cook, Mr. Koyawas, the Ganga, call Yorova.
So the kitchen tango the gab or wage, kitchen tango the guard with the kitchen even more judo. I do say tune to the
that happened at Shujin says, you know, quite getting you know, getting trouble, she was in the medical woman is called lazy race in Washington, the Gangashi, Lomo Tomo, you got Thomas and got lazy Washington, they got Jundi, Dharma.
So this might help clarify things, right? And we'll continue next week. Geshe said, Prasangikas assert that in a person, right, it undergoes momentary changes or disintegration, what do we say, but at the same time, there is the continuity of the person. So on the basis of that, so we can assert the cause and effect. And the example Geshe has given is that, so let's say if somebody is going to live for 100 years, right? So every year you live ceases, right? But that person still has to continue, right? 100-year person. So Prasangika's point of view is that the first moment it ceases to exist, which almost like transmutes into the second moment, right? The continuity is maintained. So whatever, how many moments are that, that's where on the basis of that continuity, so they think that law of karma is feasible. Yeah. All right, so I have a prayer request and then we will do dedication. Kendi tandangara de peba mi kemba sirwa gen ta paje konlu kupchu simba yo gen pala chi ro gen manzo sane gi pala chi konlu peje kupchu pegi yusa yo chewang thakwa sa gen joga ki gen re nga peje pu lo nga tu na ha gu do gen ta pala de chongdo chi sirwa de tome jem je na ro na nga ju ku sho zo shabden cha do sam
ale kesi pomonyu papa ji na dai ti
ale o din sirwa la. So I have a prayer request for senior Tibetan local person. His name is Tsewang Chakpa. I think he is on his deathbed. That's why our monks have to run to LA or wherever they're living to pray for him. And it's interesting, this person knows me from when I was 5-6 years old. He's a very long-living person. He remembers me as a child. Now I'm this old man. He's still, right? But I think he could be close to 90 or somewhere. So he is on his way. So prayer has been requested. And then any other prayers, right, we can think about, we'll do that. So today we will do the Avalokiteshvara prayer and 6-syllable compassion mantra. Chadong, Holun, Yuben, Yewon, Jendong, Geba, Sangbu, Sangyedong, Kangla, Kangdu, Dela, Dedum, Jumba, Jenre, Sil, Chanze, the Om Mani Peme, Hum, Om Mani Peme, Om Mani Peme. Omane Beme Hore Gawan Deye Nyodo Da Jere Sewan Rubyo Rawa Jijam Maluban Deye Salam Gebara Show. We have this booklet prayer. We're on page 3. Lord Yazu, Yudon, Begardin, Kesang Pombe, Judo, Mimba Shin, Temba Zinla, Wando Jichu, Tanyan, Chogun Kyola, So Wan de page 5. Mawan Dame, Gwingen Dongwan de, Kanri Jongso, Ninda, Senza, Jamgun Jawa, Niwa Yapse, Tangzon Dinzi, Mawe, Shiva, Tenzin Dorjee, Yingguan Zebe, Xie Nigu Changzhu, Tendu, Longda Tamzhu, Bebe, Beiyun, Duja Yazu, Gundo, Shabden, Tesang Kongdang, Chezu, Zombe, Yongzo, Yure, Tubu, Nyaki, Longri, Tejin, Nubu, Bede, Tuden, Kanri, Dabo, Shabden, Dona, Hongmen, Zeba, Namda, Tendang, Robe, Pende, Jumbe, Pendo, Jumi, Chebe, Tenle, Geshe Dorjee, Dendo, Shabden, Chizu, Lamen, Toge, Melamda, Geshe Dorjee, Dendang, Zangmen, Chozun, Todo, Chido, Domba, Chida, Memben, Dungu, Lundo, Show, page 9. Rangjang Xinge, Gongbo, Zeba, Me, Zodo, Namje, Geyun, Zhoma, Zhouzhou, Zeye, Lazo, Tamje, Daden, Mishi, Choge, Ngunzhu, Tubden, Jidang, Losang, Gyawa, Shiro, Tenban, Zenbe, Beiyun, Tadun, Duja, Gyongge, Xinyan, Zhou, Yangdu, Ninje, Wongbo, Sowa, Jiden, Sumgun, Chana, Bemen, Zhou, Tenbe, Zawa, Soso, Taba, Namda, Sudi, Yangda, Langba, Losang, Genden, Bedo, Shabden, Sho, Tujun, Gyaltsen, Nunzin, Yangbe, Samju, Namju, Changzin, Junbe, Gomjun, Shila, Songju, Debu, Tenbe, Ngata, Chenbo, Shabden, Chebe, Donga, Kowa, Zunbe, Rilan, Siyu, Bumda, Zunbe, Dunden, Leshe, Tangja, Kidu, Xinyin, Chenbo, Shabden, Kebe, Langdo, Kuchi, Zeda, Zunbe, Chara, Niezo, Lans, Sangbe, Duje, Rigon, Yishe, Sumden, Xinyin, Chenbo, Shabden, Tesang, Lulan, Jawe, Dende, Menjong, Taju, Zangme, Labjin, Zedin, Tendu, Beshawa, Senden, Xinyin, Chenbo, Shabden, Chozun, Gyawa, Seje, Chenlao, Tuden, Damjin, Songmen, Chenlin, Taja, Lasang, Dabe, Cheda, Memben, Dungu, Lundo, Sho, Changzhu, Simzhu, Rinpo, Maje, Bana, Yeju, Yewa, Nyamba, Meba, Gone, Gondo, Pewa, Sho, Dongnian, Dawa, Rinpo, Maje, Bana, Yeju, Yewa, Nyamba, Meba, Gone, Gondo, Pewa, Sho, Sa, Shi, Beijing, Zhuxi, Medo, Zhang, Rera, Lingxi, Ninde, Yenba, De, Sanje, Xindu, Mide, Wiwa, Dogun, Nanda, Xinla, Zheba, Shu, Kanri, Rabe, Korbe, Xingam, So, Pendang, Tewa, Man, Zhongwe, Ne, Jenre, Sewa, Tenzin Dorjee, Shabe, Sidi, Ban, Dorjee, Yidang, Guru, Niyandaya, Min, Gyawa, Gundo, Yangda, Lama, Dan, Deme, Cheje, Bela, Longje, Sada, Lamje, Yunden, Rabzo, Nen, Doje, Changi, Goba,